And this actually gets then really complicated for us because we build projects and we never do multiples of the same. Almost never we do the same projects again and again. They're all unique. They're unique in form of who the customer is, how we actually compose the project in form of like a joint venture. We have participants helping us do it. Sometimes they can come from the supply chain. They can come from a technology. They can come from the customer. Or they can come from our competitors. And if you can imagine then, as this I tried to depict on the perimeter here, is that these projects are different. Some might have a lot of participation by the customer. Some might have a lot of it by the supplier. Or opposite. They all look different. That's why we need to get some of it down to common denominator so that we can be efficient and we can be effective in delivering what we want to do. So we worked very hard on setting a goal, and that was said, and it's very simple, but we said, why not be sure that we get the right information to the right people in their environment? Not saying you have to buy this piece of software because that's the only thing I will talk to. We have to be sure that we can get it to them in a secure and cost-effective manner. So we went through this kind of an evolution, and it's a little bit of an eye strain, but I will explain a little. If you think about the first column there, we operated very isolated, every project to themselves, and we barely talked between the projects and into the company. Very, very weak networking. And we said, that's not really good enough. We went to the second and said, we better operate this much more like one company, one Bechtel, and we tied it together. We used the power of the internet to tie all of this into a very, very different operations. Then we said, well, that is really good, but the power of internet isn't really there before you also start putting the computing into that internet. So then we started kind of tossing with what later became kind of cloud computing and all that kind of stuff. And now we operate all that kind of in, if that is in public cloud or private cloud, for those of you that are interested in that, it doesn't really matter as long as you follow certain standards. And to be able to do all that, we all as an industry, the IT industry, said that we have one common networking protocol called TCP/IP. 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't unusual that an enterprise could easily have 3, 4, 5 different networking protocols depending on what system they had. We for sure had it as Bechtel. We had a certain network that we did our financial systems on. We had another network that we did engineering on. And we had kind of different networks for what we did. Again, we set the standard. So now we have set the standard in that third column of how we want to do just the basic communications. Going to the fourth column there is to say, now let us take that notch of common denominator up one notch. Let's take it into the way we then exchange the information that rides on top of this. Let us figure out how we do it, and let us figure out how we then become a part of the bigger ecosystem of the people that are in the supply chain, the people that are building, the people that are owning, and the people that are operating. When we tie all that together, it kind of gets really, really interesting. So here is an example of what we then were part of, putting together the ISO 15926. It's one way to put it together. It's a common set of determining how information should change. When you try to change or exchange data on such a broad level, you really want a set of master data. You want a master data schema. You say, well, if we call it a valve, it's a valve, and all that kind of stuff. What ISO 15926 does is that it creates that master data to be in a dynamic model. A dynamic model that says, if you come with something that nobody has defined before, I will accept it and we will start working on it. So it becomes a kind of like a living standard as you work with it. So you don't have this predetermined need that you normally had to do in the past. And the guys that worked on this actually did some really smart work. And now what we need is just figuring out how to tie into this. This form of exchange of information is not uncommon. It's uncommon in our industry. But if you start looking at the more newer industry, in the internet industry, if you look at what Google does, if you look at what Amazon does, and what you look at Salesforce.com, and you look at these kind of companies, more than 50% of the transactions they are doing is happening due to standards below, and it never happens through their applications. I think the last number I read in end of last year, there are about 6 to 8 billion of these transactions happening per month. And that is just, they agreed on certain standards, and for them it was kind of like, that makes sense. Because the way we deal with the standards is not making me either competitive or non-competitive, it makes all of us competitive, and we all kind of, the tide rise all ships. So what we have done, and what we have spent a lot of time on that we want to share and what we want other people to do, is we have gone away from the upper model. The upper model here was that engineering worked well together with engineering or within their group. So did procurement. So did construction. We tried to figure out how they could work better together. And in the end, as Bechtel, yes, we do a pretty good job at it. But we're just one small brick in the whole life cycle. So in the end of the day, when the project was over, we put it all in a dump truck, we drove it over, and here it is, you take it. You wouldn't buy anything with that kind of a user manual. You would like something more sophisticated. You would like something that then takes, that delivers a different set of information. So what we've done then is what we've done on the bottom. We're now putting this into a life cycle model where we drive the suppliers, the owner-operators, and us in a parallel track. Take a life cycle view on it, and therefore it all benefits in the end of the day. And we've done this on some projects, and it has worked really, really well. And it isn't very expensive. It's just good planning. So I want to touch on this before I conclude. We did some research and some surveys, and we found out that people that need information, 80% of the people that are working with information, everything from hardcore transaction people within an application to the incidental users, if you take all those together, 80% of them never add, delete, or edit records. They only read them. You can only do 4 things to a database. You can add a record, you can edit it, you can delete it, or you can read it. That's the only thing you can do on the high level. They only read it. How much money do we put into those guys? How much investment do we put into the people that read it? The guy that is out there with a wrench to do his job? Very little. Very little. We put all our efforts into the transactional side of the systems. If you can find a way to exchange this data and start serving that 80% that we found out, it is unbelievable what kind of efficiencies and effectiveness you can get out of it. And it's basically unavailable. The other thing what you do is when you can go in and do small little reads like this and get to the information just by reading it, you can do what we did on the bottom. You can put up dashboards on how you perform, and you can actually start be notified about things in the period, what is the kind of like the golden period. After any event, you have a little period when you can really do a lot of things to fix it before it goes really bad. I mean, you have that in health. You know, within a few minutes after a heart attack, it starts going pretty bad. But if you are within that golden period, you can actually do a lot of things good. It's the same thing with everything else. It's just the period varies. If you can then get to this information in a quick way, in a timely way, you can actually use these dashboards as leading indicators and not lagging indicators. Again, we need that common layer of how to exchange the data. And then you lay on top of that the applications that integrate with that. And then you can start doing stuff very, very cost effectively and very quickly get that information to the right people in a valuable format. So to end up here, we really need to work together on the standard side. I haven't met many people that disagree with it, but I haven't met many people that are putting a lot of energy into it either. There's some of your companies here in the room that are actively working on it, but we really need to do it. Because when we, as being the custodian of your assets for a while we build it, can help you to start up stuff faster. The owner-operators can actually get out there and get their efficiencies much, much earlier. We can improve around the range time and the maintenance and operations and all the side. And it really means in the end, we all have to work together, everything in the supply chain, the EPCs, software vendors, owner-operators. When we all get that together, and that's what things like the various industry bodies can help us with. And I really hope that as many of you as possible can help get that together and get that driven forward. So with that, thank you very much.